My name is Alice. I'm 33 years old, and if anyone ever says that the path to success is paved with rose petals, they should look into my eyes and see the imprint of every sleepless night, every difficult decision, every hard-won and hard-earned step that brought me to where I am now, a senior project manager at a respected real estate development company, where every morning I open my laptop with the confidence of someone who built her future brick by brick, without a helping hand or sudden stroke of luck, from scratch and thanks to no one but herself. But before we continue, write in the comments which city you're watching this video from. Enjoy! It took years to prove that I deserved more than just being someone's assistant. I lived through times when my ideas were mistaken for someone else's, when my achievements were dismissed, when the men sitting across from me at meetings automatically assumed they were more competent, just because someone had once told them that their voices carried more weight than mine. And yet, despite all of that, I'm proud that I didn't break, didn't give in, didn't compromise myself, and it's precisely that which ultimately allowed me not just to survive, but to succeed. And the most beautiful, the most inspiring thing is that a year ago I finally bought my own house, the very house I had dreamed of for years, imagining it at night, flipping through catalogs, studying architecture magazines, hoping that one day I too would have a place I could call mine, not one approved by parents, not borrowed from a partner, not rented on contract, but truly mine. God, how I love this place. 3 bedrooms, 2 spacious bathrooms, a bright and almost theatrically open kitchen with granite countertops that feels so welcoming in the morning, walking in wearing soft slippers, holding a cup of coffee, and a living room where massive windows generously let in the light, as if the sun itself pauses here for morning tea. I spent months choosing every single detail, from the shade of paint on the walls to the shape of the door handles, because it wasn't just a project, not just a living space, but a tangible embodiment of my independence, my strength, my taste, my inner world finally finding its way out, materializing in brick, wood, fabric, and color. The living room is painted a magnificent, deep, almost magical turquoise. Yes, I know, many think it's too bold, too intense, even provocative, but I don't care, because here I can finally be myself without needing to explain. The curtains, a creamy shade with golden threads woven in, shimmer beautifully against the backdrop of the charcoal gray sofa, which I picked out carefully and deliberately, listening to my intuition, imagining how it would look under different lighting, how comfortable it would be to sit on after a long day at work, wrapped in a blanket. And the coffee table, that's my special pride. It was made from reclaimed wood by a local craftsman, and in every groove, every little crack, there's a story. When I run my fingers along its surface, I feel like I'm touching something real, something alive, not mass-produced. My parents are kind, modest people. My father has worked at the post office for 2 decades, and he's always had this ritual, taking off his cap before stepping into the house, and I still remember him doing that when he came home in the evenings, smelling of the outdoors, envelopes, and a hint of tiredness. My mother mostly stayed at home, occasionally working as a part-time bookkeeper at a small local firm just to make ends meet. They're not wealthy, but they know how to get by, how to find joy in simple things, and I guess that's where I got my own ability to enjoy a cup of tea on the terrace, the view of the sunset, and the soft rustling of curtains. They still live in the same modest 2-bedroom house I grew up in, where I read my first Bronte novel, had my first fight with my brother over the last piece of pie, and first started imagining the kind of home I'd want for myself. And Durant, my younger brother, who's 29, works in the marketing department of a mid-sized company. He seems fairly confident in himself, though our parents still see him as the teenager he was at 15, with a slight laziness in his stride and a constant knack for dodging chores. They still treat him with a sort of cautious indulgence, as if they fear he could still lose his way. He's been dating a girl named Christina for about a year now. They met at work, in the same department, though on different teams. And to be honest, I never really liked her. She's the type who looks like she was cut out of a glossy magazine, long blonde hair, flawless makeup, designer clothes, even on a Saturday morning when most people let themselves relax. But what annoys me the most is her tone, always tinged with superiority, with the confidence of someone who doesn't just know, but knows better. At the housewarming party, almost a year ago, I still remember how my heart trembled, not out of fear of judgment, but because I wanted to show I did it, on my own, without anyone's help. I worked weekends, saved every ruble to pull together the down payment, and yes, I now pay a mortgage that sometimes makes my head spin. But every morning when I open my eyes in this house, I know it was worth it. This place is huge, Alice, my mother said, walking from room to room with a hint of worry in her voice. Yes, really nice, my father added, nodding, but don't you think it's a bit much for one person? I like open space, I shrugged. One room's my office, the other's for guests, in case anyone wants to stay the night. But I could see it in their faces. It wasn't jealousy in the usual sense, but something like it, a kind of inner dissonance. Why does she, alone, get to have so much space? How did she earn it? Christina, of course, was there, holding Durant's hand, and her glances were far more expressive than her words. Lilac walls, very bold, she said, casting a look at them as if they had personally offended her. I like it when colors express character, I replied, doing my best not to show my irritation. She let out a quiet sound, a mix between a hum and a sigh, as if she didn't agree, but still felt compelled to be polite. And that's how the whole evening went. Her interesting apron, unique tiles, original choices, all of it sounded like passive aggression wrapped in courtesy. I kept smiling and saying thank you to every one of her barbed remarks, hiding my irritation behind a polite half-smile like a shield that was slowly cracking under the pressure of relentless criticism. But inside, something in me began to tremble and boil, like a kettle forgotten on the stove, a growing sense of resentment mixed with quiet indignation, building day by day. Because who the hell was she to walk into my home, my cozy, hard-won little corner of happiness, and judge my taste, my decisions, my aesthetic as if she had been appointed some kind of secret arbiter of beauty known only to herself? This was my house, my dream home, the space I had built down to the millimeter, with care and pride, choosing every fabric, every light fixture, every shade of paint not for praise, but for a sense of inner harmony, the feeling that I finally belonged to something that belonged to me. The following months turned into a recurring, obsessive ritual, Durant's visits inevitably followed by her appearances, uninvited but somehow obligatory, like an inseparable shadow of his presence, and every time she found a new target for her commentary, a new excuse to flaunt her expertise and deliver another poisoned dart wrapped in politeness. You know, Alice, if you ever need advice on decor, I took interior design classes in college, she said one day with such casually condescending ease, as if I should immediately drop my brushes and tablecloths and line up for her blessing. Thanks, but I'm quite happy with everything, I replied, keeping on a mask of calm under which dissatisfaction was already simmering. Oh, I'm sure you are, she said with a faint smile that held not a drop of sincerity, just casual mockery, as if my contentment struck her as childish naivete. Another time, before she even finished her second cup of coffee, she thoughtfully scanned the kitchen walls and remarked that I might consider softer color choices. In her opinion, neutral tones were far more timeless, classic, and of course, much more elegant. I was growing more and more exhausted by her endless advice, by that faux feminine concern that barely concealed her blatant arrogance, but I stayed silent, held myself back, because I didn't want to strain my relationship with my brother, didn't want him to be caught in the middle, forced to choose. It seemed to me he was happy, or at least trying to appear that way, and although I genuinely couldn't understand what he saw in Christina, her coldness, narcissism, and condescending attitude toward everyone, especially me, felt unbearable even in the short term. But the final straw, the moment when something in me snapped, came about 8 months after the housewarming. Durant and Christina came over for dinner, and that evening she was especially radiant, not just in her outfit, but in her demeanor, as though she'd been mentally preparing for a scene. The moment she stepped through the door, without taking off her shoes or even properly greeting me, she gave the living room a self-important scan. Alice, I've been thinking about your living room, she said, as though we had been discussing it. Had you thought about repainting that turquoise wall? It's a bit overwhelming. And combined with those curtains, total sensory overload. And right then, without warning, without an internal countdown, I felt the circuit breaker flip. Everything I had been holding back for months broke free, but not in a scream, not in an outburst, but with the most polite, sweetest smile I could manage in that moment. You know what, Christina? When you buy your own house, you'll be able to bring all your design ideas to life. Durant looked embarrassed. I saw his gaze flicker between us, and he tried to intervene. Alice, let's, but I couldn't stop anymore. No, Durant. I'm tired of having my taste questioned every time she walks through the door. This is my house. And I like it just the way it is. Christina shot to her feet, her face stretching into the expression of someone used to being in control, suddenly losing her grip. I was just trying to help. God, you're so sensitive, she snapped, grabbing her purse as though the very house had insulted her. And you're being very helpful, I said sharply, no longer bothering to be polite, not filtering my tone. She walked to the door in quick, stiff steps, as if the space itself offended her presence. Christina, wait, said Durant, but she was already gone, and he, throwing me a look, that look full not of understanding but of reproach, distant and unwelcome, followed her, leaving behind a heaviness, like the sky after a drawn-out storm. When the door slammed shut, I remained sitting in my magnificent living room, surrounded by turquoise walls, warm light, soft textures, and cream and gold curtains, feeling a sudden, almost physical relief, not because they had left, but because I had finally stopped being silent. I had said what had been building inside me for a long time, and even though it wasn't the perfect way to resolve a conflict, I couldn't keep pretending anymore, smiling through clenched teeth while someone belittled my home, my choices, my identity. Days passed, then weeks, but there was no call or message from Durant. I thought maybe he was upset, maybe he found my behavior unacceptable, but honestly, I wasn't planning to apologize, because Christina had truly earned it. About 2 months after that scene, on an ordinary evening as I sat in my home office sorting through development proposals, the phone suddenly rang, and my brother's name lit up on the screen. I hesitated, nearly ignored the call, my heart suddenly pounding. We hadn't spoken since that disastrous dinner. "Hey, Alice," he said when I finally answered. His voice sounded different, uneasy, maybe even nervous. "Hi, Durant. How are you?" I asked, trying not to let my tension show. "I'm great. Actually, really great." "Listen, I've got news," he said, and I could almost hear the smirk in his voice. "Christina and I are getting married." I leaned back in my chair. "Wow. Congratulations," I said, and although the words left my mouth automatically, as if someone had pressed a button, somewhere deep inside, in that quiet place where emotions live that we rarely admit, I felt a flicker of something, a subtle, almost imperceptible unease, not so much from the news itself, but from the realization that everything was changing, that my younger brother, the one I used to argue with over who'd do the dishes first, was now stepping into the very adult life I had already experienced. "Thanks. The wedding is in a month. Big ballroom at the Riverside Hotel." Christina found it, and it's perfect, Durant continued with unhidden pride, and I could just picture her flipping through catalogs, tracing her fingers over photos of chandeliers and vintage armchairs, making every decision with the air of an expert. "So obviously, you're invited. I mean, you're my sister. I want you to be there." Despite everything that had happened in the past few months, despite the grievances piled up like autumn leaves in the yard, I felt a warm spark in my chest, not joy, not overwhelming happiness, but a genuine sense of anticipation. He was my brother, and if he was truly happy, if that unmistakable feeling was burning inside him, the one that makes people take life-altering steps, then, strangely enough, I wanted to be part of it. "Of course I'll be there, Durant. I wouldn't miss it," I said with a soft smile that, I think, even convinced me. "Great. There's one more thing," he added, and suddenly his voice became less confident, as if something important was pressing against his tongue, but he wasn't sure how to begin. "The wedding's going to be expensive, you understand. The venue, catering, Christina's dress, flowers, it's all a huge cost. I was wondering if you could help us with the expenses. I know things are going well at work for you, and I thought maybe." I glanced around, taking in the quiet of my office, the mortgage papers on the desk, the lists of monthly payments, the tax reminders, and even though everything was under control, I couldn't help but feel a faint tension. Living alone, after all, was an expensive privilege. But he was my brother. "How much are you thinking?" I asked calmly, already anticipating that it wouldn't be a small amount. "Well, we were hoping maybe for 20,000, he said hesitantly. "I know that's a lot, but I can give you 10 right now," I cut in, trying to sound composed, like it was no big deal. There was a pause on the other end, almost painful. Oh. Okay. I mean, that's great. Thank you, Alice. I really appreciate it, he said, but his voice carried that note, subtle, yet clear to anyone who knows how to listen, the disappointment someone tries to hide when they don't have the right to express it out loud. After the call ended, I stared at the phone for a long time, half expecting it to ring again, for Durant to call back with something else to say, a joke, an explanation, but the screen stayed dark. $10,000. It wasn't just money. It was a gesture, an attempt to show that I was there, no matter what, but to him, it seemed that wasn't enough. I transferred the money that very evening, without delay, just as I promised, and in return received a short message, "Thank you." No smiley, no follow-up, no call, just thank you, dry as a bank receipt. Several days passed, and one evening, just as I was getting ready for bed, the phone rang, Mom. It was unusual, since she almost never called without a reason, unless something really important had happened. "Alice, sweetheart, I need you to come over. We need to talk seriously. Can you come by tonight?" Her voice was tense, but too soft, like someone who had rehearsed what they were going to say. I immediately thought it must be about money, about the wedding, about how Durant had complained that I only gave 10. I mentally prepared for the accusations, prepared my defense, that I'd been helping my brother with rent every month, that I regularly sent money to my parents, and that 10,000 was not an act of stinginess but a generous contribution, especially considering my own financial obligations. "All right. I'll be there around 7, I replied. "Good. See you then," Mom said, and we hung up. When I pulled up to my parents' house that evening, the sky was heavy with low clouds, the air thick, like just before a storm. I immediately noticed Durant's car parked at the curb, and I couldn't help but sigh. A family meeting, that's exactly what it felt like, and for some reason, I already knew it wouldn't be easy. I walked in, as always, without knocking, and saw everyone already gathered at the dining table, Mom, Dad, Durant, and Christina. They all turned to me, and there was something strange in their expressions, not quite anxiety, not joy, but something like expectation, as if waiting for the reading of a will. "Hi, everyone," I said, trying to sound casual, as if nothing unusual was going on, and sat down in the only empty chair. "Alice," Mom nodded, her voice tight. Dad waved silently. Durant smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And Christina, she just stared at me, and in her look there was something cautious, restrained, like she was trying to calculate my reaction to a move that had been planned in advance. "So, what did you want to talk about?" I asked, and again that sticky tension filled the room. Mom cleared her throat. "Well, Durant and Christina are getting married next month," she began, too formally. "I know. He already told me." "Congratulations again to both of you," I said, looking toward my brother. "Thanks," Christina replied tersely, almost mechanically. "The thing is," Mom went on, "after the wedding, they'll need somewhere to live." I looked at Durant. "Aren't you two living together now in that downtown apartment?" I asked. "Yeah, but it's just a rental," he said, avoiding my eyes. "And it's not great. It's small, the neighborhood's not the best." I shrugged, still not understanding where the conversation was going. "Lots of people rent. It's not a crime." Christina leaned forward, her slender fingers resting with controlled elegance on the edge of the table, and after casting me a quick glance full of certainty and something uninvited, almost strategic, she said with cold clarity, "I'm not going to live in rented places after the wedding. I want to live in a real house. In a good neighborhood." I shifted my gaze from her face to my parents, then to Durant, trying to understand where this was going and why my evening was turning into something that felt suspiciously like a staged drama. "All right," I said calmly. "Then start looking for a house to buy. It's actually a good time for buyers, mortgage rates are going down, there's inventory." "That's the thing," Mom interjected, her lips pressed together. "They can't afford to buy a house right now. At least not a nice one. That's why they're still renting. That's what normal people do." Or, my father suddenly spoke for the first time that evening, and his tone was too calm to be innocent. Family helps family. I felt a chill run down my spine, like an invisible hand had touched it, gently but insistently. What do you mean? I asked, though I already had a strong suspicion where this was going. My mother looked at me directly, without a trace of embarrassment, as if she were saying something entirely reasonable. We think you should give your house to Durant and Christina. For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what she had just said, and her words hung in the air like a thick, suffocating fog. I'm sorry, what? I finally managed to say, struggling to get the words out. Your house is too big for one person anyway, Christina chimed in again, her voice filled with the assurance of someone who already saw herself rearranging the furniture. You don't need all that space. But Durant and I, we're starting a family. We need a real home. It just makes sense. It's rational. I looked around the table, and the way they were all watching me, with expectation, with thinly veiled approval of a decision already made, triggered such a wave of protest inside me that I barely managed not to scream. Have you all lost your minds? I said. This is completely insane. Don't be dramatic, my father said, his voice tired, as if I were a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. You make good money. You can afford to buy something else. Something more suitable for a single woman. Like a nice apartment, Christina helpfully added, something smaller, more manageable. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. My hands were shaking, my voice cracking. I'm not giving my house to anyone. Are you serious? Is this a joke? Alice, sit down, my mother said in the same tone she used when I was a teenager and trying to argue. Let's talk about this rationally. Rationally? I was nearly shouting now. You want me to give you the house I saved up for over the course of years? The house I'm still paying a mortgage on. The house I love, the one I poured everything into, my money, my effort, my soul. I spun around and headed toward the door, ready to leave this theater of absurdity, but Christina's voice, sharp and poisonous, caught me at the threshold. You're selfish, Alice. You're a terrible sister. I stopped. Turned around. Looked at Durant, who had been silent through all of it. Do you want this too? My house? I asked, and something bitter thudded in my chest. He looked away, as if he couldn't bear my gaze. Alice, it would really help us, he mumbled, and that was it. That was all I needed to hear. I walked out without another word, step by step feeling the ground beneath my feet grow colder, the air around me thickening. I drove home in a state of shock, like I had just stepped out of a play written behind my back. When I pulled into the driveway and looked at the house, my heart clenched painfully. My house, with its turquoise walls and cream-colored curtains, every nail hammered in by my own hands, the kitchen that smelled of coffee and cinnamon, the couch where I once cried tears of joy. And they just wanted me to give it away. The next morning, my phone started buzzing with relentless urgency, message after message pouring in. Mom was begging me to reconsider, to be reasonable, to act like family. Dad sent long paragraphs full of rhetoric about duty, love, sacrifice. Durant, more concise, simply wrote, "Please think about it." The messages became increasingly insistent, almost accusatory. Mom wrote about her disappointment. Dad said I was forgetting where I came from. I didn't respond to any of them. A week passed, then silence. It seemed they had finally gotten the message. The wedding was still approaching, like an unwelcome holiday, and despite everything, I still planned to go. Durant was my brother. I wasn't going to let his awful fiancée keep me from being there for him on his day. The morning of the ceremony, I picked out my best dress, a dark blue wrap dress, elegant and understated, which I had bought specifically for the occasion, as an act of loyalty to myself. I did my makeup, curled my hair, and called a cab. They hadn't sent out a wedding registry, which struck me as odd, but in the end, I decided just to send money. Everyone needs money, especially newlyweds. I transferred $1,000 to Durant's account with the note, "Wedding gift from Alice." $1,000, generous, especially considering I had already given them $10,000 for the wedding. The Riverside Hotel was truly grand, not just elegant, but almost theatrically luxurious, the kind of place where even the air seemed filtered through white rose petals, where the ceiling soared like a cathedral, and the glossy marble underfoot reflected the guests' shoes as if every step were part of a performance. The ballroom was even more dazzling, dozens of round tables covered in champagne-colored linens, neatly arranged gold flatware, tall vases with white flowers and live candles whose flames shimmered in the glow of the crystal chandeliers. At least 200 guests, maybe more, had gathered to celebrate the union of two people, and strangely enough, I was one of them. I found the seating chart, scanned the densely printed names, and located mine, table 12. I walked slowly along the rows, counting tables as I went. 1, 2, 3. They were closer to the head table, brightly lit and already filled with the wedding party, relatives, and, as it seemed, the chosen guests. Table 12 was far from the center, almost against the back wall, a clear signal of my role in this performance, to be present but not involved. Well, fine. I hadn't come for attention. I had come to stand by my brother. As I sat down, someone gently tapped my shoulder. I turned around and saw a familiar face, David Chen, director of marketing at the very company where both Durant and Christina worked. "Alice, great to see you," he smiled warmly, his voice always marked by a kind of quiet intelligence. "How have you been?" David and I had known each other for years. We were introduced by a mutual friend at a professional conference, and since then we'd occasionally exchanged messages, phone calls, updates. It was I who had once recommended Durant when he was job hunting, and it was David who gave him that chance. We chatted for a few more minutes before David had to return to his table, the third one, by the way, much closer to the head table. I noted that with a touch of irony. Interesting priorities, nothing more to say. The ceremony began, the music playing softly and subtly, as if gently inviting the guests to pay attention, and I had to admit, it was all very beautiful. Christina, in her dress, lacy, form-fitting, yet tastefully elegant, looked like an actress at the climax of her most important film, and Durant, standing beside her, was beaming with such genuine joy that even something in me stirred. For a moment, I forgot all the resentments, the unspoken things, the dramatic scenes. I was simply watching my brother marry a woman he clearly loved. After the ceremony came the cocktail hour, then dinner, which gradually transitioned into the part of the evening where the speeches began. First the best man, then the maid of honor, followed by the parents, each speaking with varying degrees of emotion. Then came the moment when my mother stepped up to the microphone and, after a few thank yous, unexpectedly said, "And now we'd love to hear from Durant's sister, Alice." I froze for a second as all eyes turned to me at once, like a wave rolling across the room. I hadn't expected to speak, no one had warned me, but fine, I could handle this. I stood up slowly, walked between the tables, stepped onto the makeshift stage, took the microphone from my mother's hand, and looked out over the room, and my eyes found Durant and Christina at the head table. "Good evening, everyone, I'm Alice, Durant's sister," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just wanted to say that I'm very happy for Durant and Christina today. Durant, you've always been my little brother, and seeing you this happy makes me happy, too. Christina, welcome to the family. I hope you have a beautiful life together." I was about to return the microphone when I noticed Christina's expression. She was looking at me with such venomous, tightly controlled anger that I paused. What had I said wrong? But before I could make sense of anything, Christina abruptly stood up and practically ripped the microphone from my hands. "Actually," she said, her voice echoing across the hall, "I don't want Alice here at all." The silence that followed felt unreal, so total it seemed you could hear someone's pulse pounding in their temple. "Alice is one of the most selfish and greedy people I've ever met," she went on, with that icy clarity that makes every word cut deeper. "You want to know what she gave us for our wedding? $1,000. 1,000. Do you know what we asked her for? Her house. Her empty, oversized house that she doesn't even need, because she's completely alone." People started whispering. Someone dropped a fork, someone else covered their mouth with their hand, but no one got up. I could feel my cheeks burning, my legs turning to lead. "Christina, please," I tried to speak, stepping forward. Can we talk about this later, in private? She pulled the microphone away, shoving my hand aside. No. Everyone needs to know who you really are. I reached for her again, but this time she shoved me so hard I stumbled. Christina, stop. I shouted, but she had already raised her hand, and the next moment, her palm slapped across my face with force. A dead silence fell over the room. I stood there, stunned, feeling the sting on my cheek, looking into the faces of my family. My mother and father stared at me with that same disapproving expression I knew so well from childhood, as if I were the one who had done something indecent. Durant stared down at his plate, avoiding my gaze. Christina's parents, seated a little farther off, nodded in quiet agreement. I waited for someone to stand up, to say this had gone too far, but no one said a word. My mother walked over and leaned toward me, hissing, "Don't make a scene. Just leave. Quietly. You've already ruined their special day." I didn't say another word. I walked back to my table, unhurried, as if everything happening around me were just a drawn-out bad dream I was about to wake from, but it was painfully real, the burning from the slap still on my face, the eyes piercing into me from all directions, the silence filling the space more terrifyingly than any noise. I picked up my purse, avoiding eye contact with everyone at the surrounding tables, and headed for the exit, feeling how each step grew heavier, how my legs felt like cotton, and my heart, like a stone I couldn't get off my chest. Outside the hotel, I called for a taxi, and while I stood on the curb pretending to study the ride tracking app on my phone, a familiar voice caught up with me. "Alice, are you okay?" David asked, appearing as if from nowhere. "I'll drive you. My car's just across the street." "You don't have to do that," I said quietly, trying to hold on to whatever scraps of dignity I had left. "You should get back to the reception." "No way," he said with a kind of calm finality that left no room for argument. "I've already seen more than enough. Let's go." He opened the door for me, and I got into his car without another word, feeling something rise up inside me, something hot and sticky, not quite anger, not quite shame, but a bitter sensation, like swallowing something sour and being unable to get rid of the taste. We drove in silence for a few minutes before I finally broke. "I've helped Durant so many times, David. I got him the job at your company. I helped him with rent. I regularly send money to my parents. And this is how they treat me?" "I know," he said softly, eyes still on the road. "I've seen how much you've done for your family. What happened in there was just wrong." When we arrived at my house, I thanked him for the ride, kissed him quickly on the cheek, and slipped inside, leaving that nightmarish evening behind me. I stood in the shower for a long time, letting hot water run down my body, hoping it would wash away not just the makeup, but everything that had built up over the past 24 hours, the humiliation, the pain, the disappointment. Then I turned off my phone, changed into soft loungewear, and crawled into bed, clutching a pillow and falling asleep not out of exhaustion, but from sheer emptiness. The next morning, I woke up late, the Sunday sun already blazing through the window, while the silence inside still rang in my ears. When I turned on my phone, I saw dozens of missed calls, countless messages. Mom, Dad, Durant, even Christina. They all said the same thing: fix this. Talk to us. Do something. At some point, it became clear they were blaming me for something specific. According to them, I had become a vindictive witch. But for what? I had no idea what they were even talking about. And so, when the phone rang again, I made the only mistake of the day. I picked it up. "Alice," my mother screamed the moment I said, "Hello, what have you done?" "Durant and Christina were fired last night. They both got messages from their bosses. They're terminated. Immediately." I stared silently at the clock. It was nearly noon. Sunday. "I didn't do anything, Mom." "Don't lie to me," she shrieked. "We know you're friends with their boss. You told him to fire them." "I didn't ask David to fire anyone," I replied coldly. "If he did, he must have had his own reasons." I ended the call before she could answer and, in that same minute, blocked every number in my family: Mom, Dad, Durant, Christina. I blocked them on social media, removed them from my messaging apps. I no longer wanted anything to do with them. I was completely, definitively done with their drama. On Monday morning, just as I was about to leave for work, dressed in a tailored suit, folder tucked under my arm, phone in hand, there came a knock at the door. Not polite, not hesitant, but furious, demanding. "Alice. Open the door right now," came my mother's voice. "We know you're in there," my father shouted. I looked out the bedroom window and saw all four of them standing on my porch: Durant, Christina, Mom, and Dad. Christina looked like she'd been crying recently, but she was shouting the loudest. "You ruined our honeymoon," she shrieked. "We can't go to Hawaii now because we don't have jobs. This is all your fault." I opened the window and, feeling not anger, but a deep, icy calm rise in me, said, "I didn't ask David to fire you. He saw how you behaved at the wedding, and he made his decision." Mom stepped forward. "You're vindictive and ungrateful. After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated, my voice now firm. "You mean, like demanding I give you my house?" "We're your family," my father shouted. "Families don't slap each other at weddings," I said evenly. "And if you don't leave my property right now, I'll call the police." I actually had the phone in my hand, my finger hovering over the call button. They lingered a moment longer, then finally turned to leave, not without Christina shouting a few more insults my way, harsh and desperate, like someone desperate not to lose the last word. After that, they stopped contacting me directly, but, as often happens in families where blood isn't enough to protect you from judgment, gossip, or twisted retellings, I started hearing about them through others, those who preferred to remain neutral but somehow always stayed informed. One day, a few weeks after the wedding disaster, my cousin Ursula called, someone I'd always considered sane and relatively grounded, despite her tendency to stay in the loop. She told me that Durant and Christina, though with difficulty, had managed to find new jobs, albeit at smaller companies and in roles far less prestigious than the ones they previously held, and, unsurprisingly, with significantly lower pay. They had to move out of their downtown apartment and into more modest housing, according to her, not new, with a narrow kitchen and noisy neighbors. I was no longer helping them with rent, and their reality had finally started to match their means. About a month after that infamous day, when the sky over the Riverside Hotel was clear but everything beneath it felt frozen solid, I got another call. This time it was from an unfamiliar number. I answered instinctively, and the voice, one I would recognize through the sound of rain, said, "Alice, it's Mom. I think we should meet and talk through this whole situation." "There's nothing to talk about, Mom," I replied, restraining that particular feeling that comes when your own parent acts like everything can be smoothed over with a cup of tea, as if nothing ever happened. "You can't stay angry at your family forever. We need to sort this out." "No, we don't. You all made it very clear where I stand, and I'm not interested in pretending that place is acceptable," I said, and with that, I ended the call and blocked the number, feeling a strange but unmistakable sense of relief. Now that I no longer had to adjust to someone else's schedule, listen to endless requests for financial help, or endure emotional manipulation disguised as concern, I found myself with far more time and energy, time I could finally devote to myself. I got a promotion at work, well-earned and long-awaited, and with it came a sense of certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I redid the guest bedroom, clearing it of any trace that it was ever meant for someone else, and started taking pottery classes on weekends, creating not for the outcome but for the process. And, perhaps most unexpectedly, David and I began spending more and more time together. He had called me a few days after the wedding just to check in, and that conversation, which began with small talk, flowed into a long, warm exchange that lasted for hours. He told me he hadn't fired Durant and Christina because I'd said anything, but because, after witnessing their behavior, he realized people like that couldn't represent his company. "I don't need employees who think it's acceptable to humiliate a family member in front of 200 guests," he said. Christina's behavior was completely inappropriate. I couldn't let someone like that remain the face of my team. We started seeing each other regularly, first coffee, then dinners, leisurely walks around the city, conversations about books, architecture, and work. And over the course of a few months, it all evolved naturally into a relationship. David understood everything that had happened with my family, because he'd seen it with his own eyes, and he never tried to convince me to get over it, never pressured me, never questioned my right to feel angry or to create distance. "You deserve better than the way they treated you," he said one evening as we sat in my living room, bathed in soft light reflected off the turquoise walls. "You're kind, generous, real." And they took advantage of that. It's been 6 months now. From Ursula, I've heard that Durant and Christina are doing okay in their new jobs, even if they earn noticeably less, and that they had to cancel their honeymoon. Instead of Hawaii, rumor has it they spent a week at a friend's house out of town. A small part of me, very small, felt a twinge of sympathy. But otherwise, I hardly thought about them at all. I'm still living in my house, the one with the turquoise walls and cream-colored curtains, where every corner reflects my choices, my effort, my freedom. No one tells me the color is too bold. No one demands I give the house away. No one criticizes my furniture or my bathroom tile. My relationship with David has only deepened, and we've even begun to talk about moving in together, maybe buying a new, bigger home, one we'd choose together. But there's no pressure, no imposed timelines, just two people who respect each other, making shared decisions not out of fear or obligation, but out of the desire to walk side by side. I don't miss the family drama, the guilt, the favors dressed up as support. I especially don't miss Christina's cold, cutting remarks. Sometimes, very rarely, I wonder whether it's possible to reconcile with my parents and Durant someday. Maybe, if they ever truly realize what they did wrong and apologize, sincerely, with no conditions. But I'm not waiting for that. And honestly, I'm perfectly okay with it. Over these past months, I've come to understand a simple but profound truth: family isn't just the people you share blood with. It's the people who choose to stand by you, who respect your boundaries, support you, and don't try to break you for their own convenience. David is that kind of person. So are my real friends. And those who tried to take my home, belittle my taste, and humiliate me in front of hundreds, those people don't deserve a place in my life, even if we share DNA. And now, I think I'm happier than I've been in many, many years. My home is still beautiful. My career is thriving. And I'm in love, truly, calmly, and for the first time with someone who genuinely values who I am. Leave a comment with your thoughts on this story, and don't forget to subscribe and give it a like. See you soon.